All right, so I got another quick devotional here for y'all today. Um, so this one I've titled "Sin Lieth at the Door," and this one comes from a verse over in Genesis 4:7, which says, "If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted, and if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire." Now, I don't have a lot of verses to go with this devotional, but the old saying goes, "Not everything is scripture, but everything's biblical." We can make practical applications out of everything, and there's a lot of things that we can discuss that's Bible that may not necessarily be scripture, because there's a lot of principles in the Bible that even like Old Testament stuff that was under the law or whatever, we can pull principles from that and make inspirational applications for us to live by today. So today I want to talk about the sin that creeps into your life. And sometimes, like I've mentioned before, I feel like I'm not maybe the best person to give lessons and stuff, but I do have to share what I've learned, and I try my best to teach other people what I've learned through the years, and try to help somebody else to do a better job than I did. I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I want to better kind of give the knowledge that I've learned, and it helps me to kind of keep it on the forefront of my mind, like I've said before, by giving out the things that I've learned. It helps bring it to my memory and help me, keep on top of it. So this is what was laid on me, and I hope that everybody can get something out of it. So, sin doesn't always show up in a limo and just walk out on a red carpet for everybody to see. Oftentimes it creeps in subtly. Over in Genesis 3:1 it says, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made." And one mistake that everybody always makes is they picture the devil as a big snake or a big red man with a tail and a pitchfork. And now make no mistake, the devil has many forms, but he don't always come to you in the image of a snake or whatever. He appears as a serpent. That's the key thing that it mentions in the Bible. In the likeness as, he appears as. It's not saying he showed up looking like a snake. The mannerisms or what he did was as a serpent. He slithers up to you all cool and smooth, and you may not even see him coming. And just like the rattlesnake you find in the desert, if you're ever out camping in the desert, one of the things that they always say to be careful of is that rattlesnakes will search for warmth at night, so oftentimes they'll slither up into somebody's sleeping bag in the middle of the night, and unbeknownst to the camper, resulting in a deadly bite in the morning when they roll over, freak out. Or the devil can, do kind of like a snake. He'll lay wait for you to get off the clear path, off in the thicket and in the tall grass and out of the will of God, just like the copperhead laying in the tall grass waiting for you to step on him and step over him, and then he strikes. Or the devil will sometimes come to you dressed in the most beautiful way to make whatever sin look like a wonderful, beautiful thing. And just like the boa constrictor showing up in an array of beautiful colors, laying wait for you to get close enough for him to grab you and strangle you. And the only way to fight the devil is by two steps. The first one's found over in James chapter 4, verse 7, which says, "Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you." And the rest of it's found over in Exodus chapter 4. It'd be Exodus chapter 4, verses 2 through 4. Exodus chapter 4, verses 2 through 4 says, "And the Lord said unto him, What is that in thine hand? And he said," I think we're talking about Moses here, he said, "A rod." And the Lord here. "And he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses fled from before it. And the Lord said unto Moses, Put forth thine hand, and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand." So I don't know if any of y'all have any experience handling snakes. But just like anything in life, fear comes from the lack of understanding. You only fear what you don't fully understand. And I personally love snakes, but with that comes from the fact that I know and understand snakes to a certain degree. I know that if I come straight face to face with a snake, that I'm going to get bit. But just like the Lord told Moses here, if I come up from behind that snake and pick it up by the tail and rest its body on the stick and keep calm, I can pick up some of the most deadly snakes in the world. But see, just like that snake, the devil don't want you to sneak up behind him. He wants you to face him head on, He wants you to face him head on by yourself so he can strike. He'll attack your faith, your health, your family, your emotions, etc. And thank God he didn't compare the devil to a wolf spider. I've yet to get a handle on those yet. But, so one of the common things we were taught back in school, back when they did the DARE programs, this is what they were, talking about. It was a DARE program to keep kids out of drugs and stuff in school. And they pressed the issue during those programs that people were going to try to offer you drugs, and they were going to try to pressure you into doing them. And now I can only speak for myself here, but in all my years, I've never had anyone to try to pressure me into doing anything per se. My first experience with everything that I ever did that was bad, we're not going to put a label on what it was, just anything that it was that I ever did that was bad. It always come down to people around me were doing it, and they made it look good. They made it seem if it wasn't a big deal or it wasn't harmful, they made it look fun or whatever. And not one time did anyone ever pressure me into doing anything or force me to do anything. Instead, what happened is that no matter how I had been taught my entire life, I was unable to fight the devil's subtle temptations. And some people may be stronger, be able to do that more. And it kind of comes from you live a certain lifestyle where you get a certain way where you start, I guess, being desensitized, and you start thinking, little things are like, well, it's not that big a deal, and well, this is not that big a deal, and you kind of start creeping off, and then you find yourself in these situations. And you can take a look at when the devil tempted Eve. There was nothing negative in the conversation there. It's like I was talking about, that when these temptations come, they're not going to be negative. It's not going to look bad. It's going to look good. It'll be all positive things. Nobody's going to try to pressure you into doing something by giving a negative to it. So, like I said, when the devil came to Eve, everything in that conversation he had with her was positive. You look over in Genesis chapter 3, verse 6. The tree was good for food. That's positive. It was pleasant to the eyes. Positive. It desired to make one wise. Positive. And this is talking about the tree of knowledge here that God told him not to partake of. So, sometimes those subtle temptations can come in the form as what you perceive as your own consciousness. Sometimes you'll get, well, now it don't look that bad, does it? Yeah, see, they're all having fun. Nobody's getting hurt. Hey, we're in a safe place here. Nobody's going to find out. If you don't tell nobody, I won't. Oh, well, I'll just try it just this once. I can quit anytime I want. And that's the root issue with sin, is that sin begins in your mind. It's not the action. And everybody always looks at like sins like, they committed murder, they committed adultery, they smoked, they drank. And yes, those are sins, but that's not where it starts at. It starts in your mind. It's that thought process. The moment you weigh the options and consider doing it is when you've sinned. Everyone always says it's this sin or that sin, so you shouldn't be doing those things. But the issue is that sin begins in your mind and not the action. So there's a quote that my pastor always says, and it kind of elaborates on this. It says, you sow a thought, you reap an action. You sow an act, and you reap a habit. You sow a habit, and you reap a character. You sow a character, and you reap a destiny. So the sin starts in your mind. You take a look at the original sin. Lucifer fell full of pride. He thought that he was better than God, and he thought that he could bring himself up high without the power of God. He said, I will ascend, indicating that he could ascend up on high without the power of God. He could do it under his own power. But there's a verse over that says that no man will ascend. No man can come to the Father except by me. So it wasn't the fact that Lucifer disobeyed God. That wasn't the problem. It wasn't the fact that he tried to fight God or even drag down the other angels. Howbeit those are problems, but those were all after the fact. That wasn't where it started at. It started with the pride in his own mind and developed down. Ultimately, he'll be thrown down in the pit. You take a look at the progression of sin. It may start out as something small, but once you push past it being just a thought, and you dabble in a little bit at a time, your old nature, that old sin nature, seeks for that high you get from that action. Whether it's that initial drug or alcohol high, that dopamine high, adrenaline high, or whatever gratification you get from whatever it is you're doing. You know, there's a theme from a TV show, and the line in that song goes like this: "This will never end because I want more. Give me more, give me more." And there's a 90s country song that says, "I like it and I love it and I want some more of it." And there's a metal song that says, "It's never enough, it's never enough." And you see, the unsaved world talks about it all the time, but often enough, as Christians, we seem to think that we're immune to it. You know, that old sin nature is never satisfied and it's never content, and as long as you continue to feed the flesh, it will grow hungrier and hungrier every day until, if you allow it, it develops into you committing not only some of the worst sin imaginable, but even some of the most heinous crimes you could think of. You know, even as a Christian, you can commit some horrible crimes and be a saved, born-again Christian on your way to heaven. If you continue to feed that flesh and feed those little sins and just progress down instead of trying to work and get better. So I'm going to give you an example here. I watch some true crime TV shows. I don't like to watch a lot of fiction. I like to watch stuff that's real. But one particular is like To Catch a Predator, and there's investigations like that with Chris Hansen. And in one of those investigations, he sat down with a sheriff over a sting operation, and he asked the sheriff what his thoughts were on how someone can get to the point of committing such a terrible crime as going after someone's child. And you know what he had to say? He said that it always starts with someone searching for a little bit more to feed that high. And in every case, these men it started out with an addiction to porn or whatever, and they would take it a little step further and a step further, and after a while, nothing would satisfy them anymore, so they would go a little darker until they progressed to the point of going after somebody's child. And Peter Ruckman, an old-time preacher, gave this illustration. He gave a very similar illustration to this one time. And he gave the illustration that how you can get to the point where the only thing that will satisfy your flesh is by mutilating somebody's dead body. And I get it. I know this is a gruesome topic and nobody wants to discuss it. But I like to take time to show the extreme of how bad it can get if you let it. It doesn't matter who you are or what you think you're capable of. If you continue to let sin get a hold of you, you will never get any better. That process is down all the way. Sin never leaves you any better than it finds you. So sin can be good. It can be things that are good for you. It's not always negative. It may be negative to other people, but for you, it may not always be bad. Most of the time, it'll be good for you. Initially, maybe not in the long run. But it can taste good. It can look good. It can sound good. It can feel good, whatever. But it's not about what's good or bad. And that's the emphasis that a lot of people try to put on sin now is, or just things as, are they good or are they bad? And that's not the question. It's about what's right and what's wrong. You know, through the Bible, God never said, when it comes to sin and stuff, what was good or bad. It's about what's right and wrong. So if it's right, do it. And if it's wrong, quit it. I can give an example for some issues I've had in my own life. There was nothing negative about any of them initially. They made me feel good. They tasted good. We had fun. Nobody got hurt, whatever. But there have been things, through that, there's been things in my life that I've struggled with. And no matter how much I tried to back off, slow down, or wean myself off, I never could do it. I was only ever able to get victory over those things whenever I came to God and said, okay, here's my issue. I want to stop, help me. And that's the only way to deal with it. You're not going to be able to do it on your own. When it comes to, especially with addictions, or you could be addicted to caffeine. If you want to quit that, it's going to be hard to do it on your own. You've got to lean on God and let Him help you, not just try to do it yourself. It's not going to work that way. So, hey God, here's my issue, help me stop. And so we cut it off right there. And sure, it was hard, and temptation was around every corner. And just like it says over in Genesis 4:7 when we started, sin lieth at the door. But you've got to cut that junk off completely. You can't keep feeding that flesh. You can't wean yourself off. Whenever I try to quit smoking, man, weaning yourself off just doesn't work. You know, whenever I quit smoking and chewing tobacco, I tried weaning off. I tried nicotine patches. I tried vapes. I tried tobacco-less chew, and nothing would work for me. And some people may have success with that. You know, I quit temporarily a few times doing that stuff, but I wasn't ever able to just completely and that was it. I struggled for several years. I mean, I smoked from the time I was 14 till I was 27, something like that. You know, it's hard. And anybody that's ever tried to quit knows how hard it really is. It's probably one of the most difficult things I've ever done. But it wasn't until with God that I had set my mind to quit and threw it all down. And now I've been 6 years or so. I don't know. It's been a pretty good while now. But I've been, quite a few years without it now. And it's still hard to this day. But I have to constantly remind myself every day that everything that I had ever did that was bad, that made me feel good, in the moment, it never actually made me any better. It only caused suffering in some secondary way. You know, that first cigarette high you get is the only one you'll ever get. The rest of your life, you'll be chasing that same high. You'll puff away a pack a day, 2 packs a day, and never get that feeling again. You keep smoking to feel better, and the longer you go, the worse you feel. You stink. You struggle to breathe. Your lung health gets worse. You take up vast amounts of free time just to do it, all just to feed that flesh the lie of that high you've been chasing. And we're not just talking about smoking here. I mean, this is any sin you have in your life that gives you any kind of gratification other than what you get from God. It doesn't matter what it is. So, I had somebody in my Lifeline group, that's part of my ministry here, give a lesson on a Thursday night a while back. And he brought up the point on people quitting smoking, and he said that most people you hear say they want to quit never do. And every person out there that smokes or has a drinking problem, they always say they need to quit. And I'll tell you this, since me and my wife has quit smoking, we've had several people tell us that we're the only people they know that said they were going to quit and actually did. Now, why is that? Well, now that I've smoked and chewed tobacco for 14 years or so and it quit, I can tell you why. Once you allow whatever it is into your life that you get addicted to, it doesn't matter what it is, drugs, alcohol, tobacco, social media, whatever. Once you allow it in, you start to depend on that to pacify you, to make you feel better. You lean on it in hard times. It then becomes something you have to do. So now you're addicted to it. And even say your addiction is to your phone or social media or whatever, you find yourself constantly, every time you have a free chance, picking up your phone. You know, if you're a smoker, every free chance you get, I gotta go grab a smoke. Well, I gotta hurry up and get out of here so I can go smoke. So you say, okay, well, it's time to quit now. And by this point, you've sowed the habit. So you think now, well, 14 years, I'll wake up every morning, the first thing I do is go smoke a cigarette. And as soon as I finish eating, you gotta go smoke a cigarette. And then you gotta have one on the car ride to go somewhere. And if you don't smoke in your vehicle, then you gotta have one before you get in the car, then you gotta have one as soon as you get where you're going. And the same thing when you finish there, you gotta go to your friend's house, and you got to go out and smoke together, and you got to smoke before you leave. You're wasting years of just vast amounts of time just doing this dumb junk, and you don't think about it when you're doing it. You know, for me, the first couple of years after I quit, I couldn't sit by a fire pit or a campsite without craving a cigarette terribly. That was one of the hardest things for me, because for years, we'd camp out and have a fire pit every weekend, and just sitting by the fire pit, I'd smoke an entire pack of cigarettes, just sitting there talking. It was just a social thing. And it just created that habit, and it took me years to, it's just now got to the point now where that doesn't bother me as bad. So, it's just to make the point here that once you allow a sin or an addiction to become a habit, it becomes part of your life. They say it takes 66 days to form a new habit. So what do you do for those 66 days from the time you stopped whatever it was you were doing until you can develop a new habit? And this is the failure point for everyone when it comes to stopping any habit or addiction. It's so easy to give up and stop all the suffering and just go back to doing whatever you're doing so you can feel better. You have to daily work at getting your mind off of whatever the habit you had was and try to implement new habits. Good habits, right habits. You can put good habits in there, but make sure they're right habits. You know, everything I've ever broke myself from, I had to substitute it with something right. But you've got to be careful about, but what you've got to be careful about in your life is that it's not about what's good or bad, like I said before. Most sin out there is good, it's positive. Just like I said before back in Genesis, when Eve took of the fruit, there was nothing negative there. The food was pleasant to look upon, it tasted good, and it would make one wise. But I say most, but probably all sin you would ever do would be positive for you in some way. Maybe not for others, but it makes you look good, feel good, whatever, and you get some sort of gratification or high from it. And it's not about what's good or bad, like I've said a few times here. It's about what's right and wrong. So if it's right, do it. And if it's wrong, you'd better quit. I hear all the time people say, oh, well, my preacher's good, or whatever. And I'll check them out. And, you know, I'm not trying to target anybody here, just speaking reverently. They may be a good man. They may be good at illustrating the point that they wanted to make. But are they right? Not always. You know, they can be good people, good men, good preachers, good. They're not always right, though. You know? I believe the fundamental issue that people have is the standard from which they base what's good or bad or right or wrong from. You know, people look at child pedophiles or mass murderers out there and they say, well, see, what I'm doing ain't that bad. Okay, but it ain't that good either. You know, the standard is Jesus Christ. Take a look at Jonah. He wanted to run from the Lord, and the Lord told him, go down and witness and preach. And he said, I'm not going. Well, the Bible says he went down to Joppa. He went down into a ship. He went down into the bottom of the ship. He went down into the water. And he went down into the mouth of the belly of the whale. And if that wasn't enough, the whale swam down to the bottom of the mountains. So you want to know what that course is? It's straight down. Once you get on that course, it's down all the way, unless you get off that course and start heading back up the way that God told you to go. And that's why you see the verse over in Matthew chapter 5, verse 30, which says, and if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be the case into hell. And I'm not telling you to cut your hand off. We're just illustrating the point here. If you've got an issue in your life, there's no weaning yourself off. Cut that junk off with the stump right there and be done with it. Don't allow it to become a problem. Don't keep feeding it. As hard as it is, by all means, I of all people know how hard it is. If you've got an issue, don't care what it is. The Bible plainly says you shouldn't be doing this. This is bad for you for whatever reason. You need to stop doing it. The Bible tells you how God feels about it. It doesn't matter what you think or feel. You need to be doing how God says do it. And believe me, I know how hard some things are to kick. I still struggle with certain things in my life nowadays. We all do. We all will. There's always going to be things we'll struggle with. The end of your problems doesn't start at salvation. Sometimes it starts a lot of problems because you come into a whole new set of things. You know, it's a constant, daily working. You know. So I hope this helps somebody in some way. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'll help any way I can. Thank you. Bye.